well-balanced mind is about really understanding your mind. Understanding your emotions, understanding everything about human behavior and how it can help you create a healthier and happier lifestyle. Everything starts with the mind, and what the mind affects can be changed.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Women have needs too. Yes, we do. And right now, we need to learn how to be more of an influencer. And today, we're talking with Ria Story. She's with Blue Collar Leadership. Ria understands the frustration of lacking self-confidence, not having the ability to influence other people, and feeling like a victim of our circumstances. She was sexually abused by her father from age 12 to 19 and trafficked by him. Ria left home at 19 without a job, money, or a high school diploma. Realizing the biggest obstacle to success is embracing excuses, Ria set her goals high and worked to achieve them. She shares her compelling story of transformation from trafficking victim to a top leadership trainer and TEDx speaker, delivering a message of hope and inspiring audiences to remember that what happens to us doesn't define us. Ria, along with her husband Mac, has trained and coached thousands of leaders across the country and internationally. Ria is a certified leadership speaker, coach, and trainer, is the author of 13 books on personal growth and leadership topics, as well as her extremely popular Fearfully and Wonderfully Me, Become the Woman You Are Destined to Be. Ria, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure, Linda.
What a story you have, and it is compelling to know that where you've come from and where you are, and you have the ability to teach influence as well as influence. And I mean, I can't even imagine, a portion of all my proceeds goes to an organization called Created. It's an organization for trafficked women, not for trafficked women. They're based in Tampa. And to know what you've been through, and how did you come from that place to where you are now? I know we only have a few minutes out of your life to jump through that, but can you give a basic understanding of how and what? Do you remember that pivoting moment that you just said, okay, I'm making a change and this is not going to be my life? This is not going to define me.
To answer your question, there are a couple of defining moments, but I think, like anything, transformation is a journey. So I can point to a couple of specific moments where I made the decision, but that's not enough, right? Like anything, making the choice and making the decision is the first step, but you have to take the second step and the third step. After I left home, I didn't want to talk about what happened to me. I didn't talk about it. And for many years, I just kind of shoved it up in a closet and locked it and threw away the key and said, I'm not going back. I'm not going there.
Yeah.
And, that was my method of surviving, but that's not really healing, right? That's not necessarily thriving. I went on to be successful. I, got a GED and started taking some college classes and got my MBA and worked my way up to what I considered a successful career.
Yeah.
And in 2013, I heard a man named Les Brown speak. And if you've never heard Les Brown, he's
love Les Brown.
Fabulous. Yes, fabulous motivational speaker. And he's speaking to a whole room full of people, right? And he said, you have a story to tell, and someone needs to hear your story, and only you can help them. And I thought, I've got a story to tell, but I don't want to tell it. I worked really hard to forget it.
Yeah. And that
And, you know,
is, that's true with so many people, is that they do harbor it because it's their way of not healing but surviving. And you do have to go through a survival mode, I think, before you get to that healing mode, right?
I would agree. You know, and sometimes we learn to cope before we can learn to overcome, and that's just part of our growth. So it took me 6 months after hearing Les Brown say that before I shared my story publicly. Beyond that, only a few
Wow.
family members and close friends even knew. And I shared it on a stage at I went for a speaker training, and part of the speaker training was you had to craft a 1 minute speech. You could say anything you wanted, but you could only speak for 60 seconds.
Sounds like
And
Toastmasters.
it was a challenge.
Yeah.
And I'd been weighing about this decision and thinking about it. I didn't even tell anybody that I was considering it because I wasn't sure that I could go through with it. But I did. As it turns out, I got on that stage and I shared ended up being 47-second speech and saying, I'm not going to let the past hold me back. And in doing that, I proved it.
And do you think that by verbalizing it, that you made a commitment to yourself and a commitment to other people that you were not going to live in the past? You were not going to let that define you.
Absolutely. And I think that's the big thing is we've got to own what happens to us so that it doesn't own us.
I love it. So I think it's wonderful to survive, because we do have to survive these things that happened to us in our past, and it's important to heal. And then you, like you said, you worked your way into thriving, and you're not going to thrive if you haven't gone through that healing process. Correct?
I agree. I think that's part of it is, owning up what happens in our past is painful. I mean, my story is unfortunately not that uncommon, but it's not everyone's story. But we all go through something. We all face adversity in life. But learning that it influences us, absolutely, but it doesn't define us. It doesn't have to hold us back. What happens to us is not as important as who we become because of it.
And I agree totally. Would you have a piece of advice for that woman who is maybe harboring and hasn't gotten through to that healing mode yet? And I mean, I know you being here today gives every woman hope that they could survive something so horrible, but then to thrive, because you've not only gone through the healing process, and you're not only just surviving, but you are thriving as a human being and as a woman going through what you have gone through.
I think the best piece of advice, if I could only pick one, would be to focus on growth. And maybe that's growth in just one area of your life. And maybe that's enough to get started. And, start where you can and just be intentional about growth. Because if you're stuck in a place where you've been through trauma or adversity or a challenge, you have to grow through that and not just go through that, right? And I'm a big fan of the term. I mean, we've all heard of post-traumatic stress. There also could be post-traumatic growth. But what if we could tap into pre-traumatic growth, right? What if we could grow ourselves and develop ourselves so that we are better equipped to meet the challenges in the future as well? But the foundation for that, and I think the foundation for healing, is growth. And, start small. Start by reading a book. Start by expanding your awareness and awareness of self. Maybe it's just growth physically. Maybe it's, taking on a little challenge and committing to a healthier lifestyle in one dimension. I think we all come from different places and we all start in different ways, but the important thing is to just get started growing. And that will help you grow in other areas of life too.
I agree. So this has been one thing that, it just lays heavy on my heart, is exactly what you said about pre-trauma. Because I feel like, I was the luckiest little girl in the world. I was raised by a set of parents that did teach me at an early age, they taught me courage. They taught me survival skills. And I feel like they taught me how to be strong in certain situations. And I don't feel like every little girl is taught that. Because I mean, you were born into a bad situation, it sounds like, and we don't ask what we're born into. It's just there. And so we're given these situations that we have to learn how to deal with as we grow up. But what about the parents who have not just little girls? I mean, bad things happen to little boys too. And then just in general, it doesn't even have to be about trafficking. It's just in general preparing them for any kind of trauma. Because I feel like a lot of kids today, they're not prepared to cope with the bad things that come along the way. And let's face it, there's going to be some bad things. We're not, sugar plum and fairies here, right? Bad shit's going to happen. How do we prepare our kids for that? I mean, there's got to be, ongoing teaching lessons, throughout that period, don't you think?
Absolutely. I think it's important that we help our kids and our children develop character. Research shows us that 87 to 90% of success in life is our character. It's who we are. And only 10 to 13% is competency, what we know how to do, our skills, abilities, talents. The problem is that most of us focus on developing our competencies. Now, don't get me wrong, we need competencies, right? That's what you get hired to do a job for. But it's how you do what you do that determines your influence with other people, your success in life. And I'll give you an example. I guarantee you want your medical doctor to have graduated from med school, right? They
A's.
better have. Yes. And that's
straight
competency,
A's.
Right? If they're practicing medicine, yes, I want them to be competent. But it's how he or she makes you feel in the 2 minutes in the exam room that matters sometimes if you even want to go back. Or maybe it's not even the doctor's character. Maybe it's the receptionist who didn't look you in the eye when you walked in, or the nurse that walked you back, right? And so we spend a lot of time today in our culture focused on competency, but we forget to develop things like characteristics that contribute to our influence. Attitude, teamwork, integrity, right? It's how we do what we do that determines our success in life.
Yeah, let's talk about influence, because there are people who are suffering with, reactions from the last year. And now they're looking for new situations, new jobs. And, to go in and ask for a job, you have to have a certain amount of influence, right?
Yeah, influence is so incredibly dynamic, right? And you've heard the saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. But that's influence, right? What you know can be part of influence, your resume, but how you interact even in that job interview, we know that. A lot of times that can determine our influence. And so any of us want more influence, right? I like to talk about leadership, and I love Maxwell's definition. Leadership is influence. And we don't all think of ourselves as leaders, but we all want more influence. We don't want to just influence people at work, right? We want to influence our kids to make better choices in life. We want to influence our spouses, our parents, our friends. And the same leadership and influence principles that help us at work help us be more effective at home as well. And so that's why I'm always, just such a big believer in just grow and develop yourself. Are you studying those characteristics that will help you with influence? Are you reading a leadership book? Whether you consider yourself a leader or not, I guarantee you want more influence. Because you think of any time in life when you are mad or sad or upset or frustrated, it's because you didn't have enough influence in that situation.
That is so true. And I'd like to clarify that influence doesn't necessarily mean control. It just means, somebody listening, right?
Yeah, influence is based on our relationship, and relationships are built on trust. And I think this is not a feminist statement, but I think women by nature are a little more nurturing. It's just a fact. And that can be an incredible strength when it comes to influencing someone, right? Because influence is built on relationships and trust. women just naturally go to the how's your kids doing? How was the soccer game the other night? It's just a little more, we're just a little more relational. And that can be a great strength, but we have to learn to balance that with getting results, right? It's great to just love and hug everybody, but we also have to get results, particularly in a job or in an organization. We have to learn to balance that strength and leverage it. But no, influence is all about moral authority instead of just having a position of authority, a formal position of authority.
One of my favorite books was How to Win Friends and Influence People. Mm-hmm. And to me, it was a lot of common sense because that's how I was raised. Yes. You be nice to somebody because you want them to be not. You're not being nice to someone just because you want them to be nice to you, but you do treat other people how you want to be treated. With love, respect, and kindness. And that book just is, to me, full of common sense. But it's a lot of common sense that some people didn't grow up with.
Yes.
Yes. And the purpose behind the book is so you can get more of what you want out of life. It's not to control people, it's to influence them so you can figure out your path, right?
Yeah, there's a difference between influence for manipulation or influence for motivation.
Correct.
Right? We're not trying to influence people just so that we can take advantage of them. That's manipulative.
Right.
And I think it's important to note that influence can be used in a negative way.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to point out. Yeah, so
yes.
Yeah, so we're not just trying to influence people just to have a win on our side. Everything's in my book. It's a win-win, And so when I'm trying to influence someone, it's because I'm trying to help them. Usually, Like the conversation we were having earlier about, juicing. I did the juice thing and my husband wasn't doing the juice thing. I'm doing it because I want to feel better. Meanwhile, he's, sluggish, tired. So part of my influence on him was me feeling better and me just keep doing the same thing, the right thing for myself. And now he's doing it because I was able to influence him on that better path. But it wasn't going to help me to help him. It was just helping him, right?
Right. And influence and leadership is more caught than taught, right? We have to be the example. It doesn't inspire anyone if we say one thing and do another. In fact, that decreases trust and decreases influence. Nothing quicker than that. So, it is more being the example. And the thing is, we can't change other people, right? We can't control other people. We cannot make somebody else do something. We can't control much of what happens in life. But we always have the power to control how we respond to it. And that's
so true.
The power of emotional freedom is being proactive and saying, I don't have to let anyone else decide if I have a bad day, right? If something bad happens, it doesn't have that it doesn't determine me. It doesn't control me here.
That's right.
And that's where our influence comes from. Not from being perfect or never making mistakes. None of us are perfect. But just being willing to overcome that.
Do you think it comes down to just a basic decision to not let other people affect your good day? Or do you think it's something that you have to, I think if you're mentally aware, like I always like to use traffic as a good example for me, because I used to get upset when people cut me off in traffic. But then I remember, you know what? Sometimes I cut people off in traffic, Mm-hmm. And sometimes, and the way I look at it, sometimes I'm in a hurry, but then there's other times they're in a hurry. So, now I just laugh at people and wave to them and think, okay, you're in a hurry today. I don't get upset by it anymore because I don't want it to affect my day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and our influence never increases with positive people when we blow up in any situation, right? When things are going well and we choose a positive, proactive response, people pretty much expect you to. But when things are going bad and you choose a positive, proactive response, that's when your influence increases with positive, valued people. So Stephen Covey, I love his definition of, the emotional pause button. He says that when something happens, human beings have the freedom to pause and choose a response. So between stimulus and response, we have the freedom to pause and choose that response. And when we get that right, our influence, options, and opportunities in life increase. And when we don't choose well, then our influence, options, and opportunities can decrease.
I love that you brought that up. That is so true. And I think it's a good point for us to end on, because we're coming up on our end time. It's so important that I want you to repeat it, because we do have a pause button. We just need to learn to use it, right?
Yes. Don't give anyone else the remote control to your emotional frequencies.
Thank you.
So Stephen, yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead, Stephen Covey. What? Go ahead.
You just said repeat the quote.
Yes,
He says,
please repeat it, because I think it's worth repeating.
Stephen Covey says, between stimulus and response, human beings have the freedom to pause and choose our response. Right? It's a powerful tool as leaders, as women, as human beings.
And you teach influence, right? Don't you teach influential, influence? What you tell me how you word it.
Yeah, I like to really focus there again. The most difficult person in the world, to influence is ourselves, right? The one sitting in your chair. And we have 100% control over ourselves. And yet there are things in life that we know we should do, we don't do, or we know we shouldn't do, that we do, right? And so I'm a big believer in learning how to control that, learn how to change my mindset and develop that. Because as I develop myself, my influence will increase. And then I love to talk about the principles that help us increase our influence with other people. And it's just like any other skill, we can develop it. I wasn't great at it to begin with,
Right.
but I've learned to get better. And just like anything else, when we learn and intentionally apply that skill, we find that our world expands exponentially.
I love it, and it's so important, to be able to go from a hurting place to a surviving place, to a healing place, to an influential place. And that influential place is so important in our daily lives and in our work lives. But more importantly, I think it's more beneficial to be a personal success than a business success. I always say happiness is underrated. And we're not happy when we feel like we're the one being influenced all the time, right? If we're living by somebody else's rules and guidelines, we want to be the person who are making the decisions for ourselves, right? Can we talk about, and we're going to close, but I really want people to understand what level of training that you do. And can we talk about some of the companies that you've trained for, or the type of companies that you train for? And your capabilities?
Sure, some of the client, and a lot of what I do is with my husband's blue collar leadership, and then I focus my lane a little bit on women as well, leadership skills for women. But some of the companies that we've worked with have been great organizations who are just interested in getting better. We spent some time teaching some leadership for the U.S. Navy, for Chick-fil-A, Chevron, Auburn University. Again, great leaders are always aware that their competitive advantage is developing their people, right? Because when you help people have a better life personally and professionally, then you start attracting great employees who are recruiting you. They want to come work at your organization.
So true.
So the principles apply from an organizational perspective and an individual perspective. Absolutely powerful when we apply them.
That's beautiful. Well, I want to have you back on because I want to talk about that book. And I'm gonna try not to mess it up, but the Fearfully and Wonderfully Me. And then there's a tagline to that.
Yes, become the woman you are destined to be.
Becoming the woman you're destined to be. We are going to, if you agree, we will have you back on so we can talk about that book. Does that sound good?
Sure. Would love to, Linda.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you so much, Ria. And women have needs too. Right now, I need to be more of an influencer in my life. And thank you, Ria Story, for joining us. And thank you, everybody out in the audience, for joining us today. Have a great day. Take care.